Tonight, under the quiet glow of the moon, we journey back to the age of samurai, where steel was not just a weapon, but a spirit. If you enjoy drifting into the past with stories like this, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, so you'll never miss the next tale that whispers through history. Samurai legends and the hidden world of ancient Japan. The mountains of Yamato were quiet that night. Mist clung to the valleys like a ghost, and in the silence only one sound carried far into the dark, the ringing of hammer against steel. Inside a small forge, flames roared and sparks flew like stars being born. Amakuni, the master swordsmith, stood bent over his anvil. His arms trembled with exhaustion, his face smeared with soot, but his eyes burned with obsession. Beside him, his son Amakura worked the bellows, sweat dripping from his brow. They had not slept for days. Amakuni's heart was heavy. He had seen warriors return from war with their swords shattered, their spirits broken, not because they lacked courage, but because their weapons failed them. He could no longer bear it. One night, he lifted his hands to the heavens and cried out, "Gods of iron, fire, and thunder, grant me the strength to forge a blade that will never break." For 7 days he prayed. For 30 nights he labored. He folded the iron upon itself again and again until it carried not just strength, but spirit. When the final hammer strike fell, the forge was silent, but for the soft hum of cooling steel. Amakuni held up the blade. It curved like the crescent moon, its edge glowing as if the sun itself had kissed it. He whispered a vow to the gods and to the warriors who would wield it. "This blade will not fail you. Not now. Not ever." It was the first katana, and in that moment, the soul of the samurai was born. Yoshitsune and the warrior monk centuries later, Kyoto shimmered like a jewel. Golden rooftops caught the sun, and silken banners fluttered over bridges and rivers. But beneath the beauty, the land was torn apart. The Minamoto and Taira clans waged war, and blood stained the rivers red. Amid this chaos rose a young man named Minamoto no Yoshitsune. He was not broad of shoulder or heavily built. He looked more like a poet than a warrior. But on the battlefield, Yoshitsune was untouchable. He moved with a speed that left men breathless, his swordplay a dance that no one could follow. One night, as the moon shone over the Gojo Bridge, Yoshitsune's path was blocked by a giant. He was Benki, a warrior monk, towering over all men. His armor was blackened by war, his naginata longer than most men were tall. Benki had sworn to defeat 1,000 samurai and strip them of their swords. Yoshitsune would be his 1,000th. Benki's voice thundered across the bridge. "Another sword for my collection." The duel began. Benki swung with the force of a falling tree, his weapon shrieking through the night air. Sparks flew with every strike as steel met steel. The bridge trembled under his fury. But Yoshitsune was no ordinary man. He leapt, spun, and slid, his movements too swift to follow. He seemed to dance with the wind itself, his blade flashing like lightning. Benki roared, striking again and again, but Yoshitsune slipped through every opening until, at last, he struck, disarming the giant monk with one clean motion. The bridge fell silent. Yoshitsune's blade hovered over Benki's chest, but instead of killing him, Yoshitsune stepped back and lowered his weapon. Benki, stunned by mercy, dropped to his knees. "From this day forth," he said, his voice breaking with reverence, "I am yours to command." From that night, Benki became Yoshitsune's most loyal companion. Where Yoshitsune was wind and fire, Benki was stone and steel. Together, they would carve their names into eternity. Tomoe Gozen, the Woman of Thunder. The tales of the Heike speak of many warriors, but one name blazes brighter than the rest: Tomo Gozen. She was described as a rare beauty, her skin pale as snow, her hair black as the raven's wing. But when she donned her armor, she was no woman, she was a tempest. She rode at the head of 1,000 cavalry, bow in hand, sword at her side, her voice commanding men twice her size. At the Battle of Awazu, Tomo faced the impossible. With only 300 soldiers, she confronted an army of 6,000. The earth shook with the thunder of hooves, banners whipping in the wind, the clash of steel deafening. Tomo charged. She cut through the enemy ranks like a storm tearing across the sea. Her arrows found their marks, her sword struck with unyielding fury. Chronicles tell of her seizing an enemy general by the collar, dragging him from his horse, and cutting him down with a single strike. Though her fate remains uncertain, some say she was captured, others that she vanished into legend, her spirit became immortal. To this day, Tomoe Gozen is remembered not as a woman who fought like a man, but as a samurai who fought like no other. Kusunoki Masashige, 7 Lives for the Emperor. The 14th century brought chaos once more. The emperor and the shogunate fought for power, and in the middle stood Kusunoki Masashige. He was a strategist, a man who built fortresses in the mountains and lured armies into traps. Time and again he defeated larger forces with cunning and patience. But his true legend was not in victory. It was in how he faced defeat. At the Battle of Minatogawa, Masashige was hopelessly outnumbered. His allies begged him to flee. He smiled and said, "If only I had 7 lives, I would give them all for my emperor." And then he rode into the storm. Surrounded, outmatched, his forces crumbling, he fought until his last breath. His death became a beacon of loyalty. Even today, statues of Masashige stand near Tokyo's imperial palace, a silent reminder of devotion beyond death. The warlords and the wandering sword. Saint, out of chaos came ambition. 3 names would shape Japan's destiny: Oda Nobunaga, who burned through tradition with ruthless innovation; Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the peasant who rose to unify the land; and Tokugawa Ieyasu, the patient strategist who built an empire that would last for centuries. But in the shadows of these titans walked another figure, Miyamoto Musashi. He was not born of noble blood. He had no clan to call his own. At 13, he fought his first duel and killed a man. At 16, he left his village, wandering from town to town, seeking challengers. Over the years, he fought more than 60 duels. He never lost, but his methods were strange. He would arrive late to duels, unnerving his opponents. He wielded 2 swords at once when others clung to one. He carved weapons from wood and still struck men dead. His most famous duel came against Sasaki Kojiro, master of the swallow cut. On the boat ride to the island where they were to fight, Musashi carved a wooden sword from an oar. When the duel began, he killed Kojiro with a single crushing blow to the skull. Later in life, weary of blood, Musashi turned inward. In a cave, he wrote The Book of 5 Rings, a meditation on combat, strategy, and the nature of life itself. He became known not just as a warrior, but as a philosopher, the Kensi, the sword saint. Yasuke, the African samurai. Of all the legends, none is stranger than Yasuke. He was brought to Japan by Portuguese traders around 1579. He was taller than most men, broad-shouldered, and his skin dark as midnight. Crowds gathered in Kyoto to see him, some believing he was painted in ink until he washed himself clean before them. When Oda Nobunaga met Yasuke, he was fascinated. Here was a man unlike any he had ever seen, powerful, dignified, fearless. Nobunaga took him into his service, trained him, and in time, Yasuke became a samurai. He rode into battle beside Nobunaga, his presence awe-inspiring. But when betrayal struck and Nobunaga was forced to take his own life at Hanoji, Yasuke's fate grew uncertain. Some say he was captured, others that he disappeared into the mists of history. Yet his legend lives on, the African samurai who defied every expectation. Spirits in the shadows. But Japan is a land where the line between the living and the dead has always been thin. Even the seas remember. In the waters near Dan no Ura, fishermen still pull up heikagani, crabs with shells that bear the faces of angry men. They say these are the spirits of the Heike clan, defeated in battle, cursed to wander the ocean floor forever, their fury carved into nature itself. And every summer, in Fukushima, the thunder of hooves fills the air. The Soma no Maoi festival, 1,000 years old, brings forth men in armor who ride across the plains chasing wild horses. No longer war, but memory. No longer blood, but spirit. The way of the warrior. So what was a samurai? A killer? A servant? A man bound by duty? Or something far greater? They lived by Bushido, the way of the warrior. To be loyal, to be disciplined, to value honor more than life itself. Some call it cruelty, others beauty, but all agree it was unforgettable. The sword of Amakuni, Yoshitsune's mercy, Tomoe's fury, Masashige's devotion, Nobunaga's fire, Hideyoshi's cunning, Ieyasu's patience, Musashi's wisdom, Yasuke's mystery, all threads in a tapestry woven of blood and steel. The age of the samurai has ended, but their ghosts walk beside us still. In every shrine, every story, every gleam of a blade, they whisper, and those whispers will never fade.